Good afternoon to all of you, wherever you are around Australia, or indeed welcome to those as well who I understand are joining us internationally. I too would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which I'm located, the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. This is the first summit that I've been honoured to participate in as the national patron of the Asian Australian Lawyers Association. I was honoured to have been invited to become national patron following the Honourable Michael Kirby, who's happily agreed to continue his association with the organisation as emeritus patron. The creation of that position, together with the position of international patron, filled by Lord Justice Rabinder Singh of the UK Court of Appeal, has created an engaged and supportive triumvirate of which I'm honoured to be part. And to assure you that we are all committed to the association, we recently spent over an hour on Zoom getting to know each other and discussing the aims of the association and how we could best play a part. To touch briefly on my own credentials, many of you would be aware that I was Chief Justice of the Family Court for 13 years, until my retirement in 2017. During my time as Chief Justice, I was very conscious of the need for the court to be relevant to a variety of cultures, and the court had multicultural training for judges since 2000, and we engaged in community outreach from time to time with emerging communities. For all of my tenure on the court, I was very much involved in a program which we did together with the Federal Court and the Indonesian courts, sharing with them some of our processes and procedures which could be utilised by them. We in the Family Court worked with the religious courts, who mostly deal with marriage, separation and children. And I'm immensely proud of the ideas we were able to offer and the support we were able to give, and the way in which the Indonesians adapted and implemented them to measurably improve the lives of women and children in particular. As a few concrete examples, the courts are now funded to do circuits to rural areas which didn't occur previously, to provide trained paralegals to assist with document preparation, and to waive court fees when parties are impecunious. There are many more achievements that occurred, and the program continues with the support of the current Chief Justice. My involvement with the Permanent Bureau of The Hague as Hague Network Judge for Australia in relation to the Abduction Convention allowed me to have much interaction with lawyers and judges in countries in the Asia-Pacific region who were just adopting the convention and who looked to Australia for guidance. I was also fortunate to have been part of the Chief Justice of Singapore's International Advisory Committee, established to advise on international best practice for the newly established Singapore Family Justice Courts, and to have had some involvement in the practices and procedures that they're adopting. So I feel I've had an affinity with courts and legal systems in the Asia-Pacific region and some understanding of their legal cultures. Finally, post my retirement, I'm the president of the Graduate Union of Melbourne University, which importantly operates Graduate House, providing accommodation for postgraduate students. Prior to COVID, the cohort of residents was largely international, so I'm part of an organisation now very much affected by the closure of our borders to international students and concerned about the future. My position as national patron of this organisation gives me the opportunity to continue to be involved in promoting cultural diversity in the legal profession and the judiciary, which I care very much about. The President has spoken in his remarks of a larger, altered and formidable environment. It reminds me of what Charles Dickens wrote in A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. That could have been written about the pandemic and the lockdowns, and if you like, recent American politics. COVID-19 has undoubtedly created challenges for many groups, and Asian Australians are amongst them. The origins of the pandemic saw some anti-Asian sentiments and inherent racism in our community, unfortunately. The border closures in Australia have affected international students enormously, and the government was far from welcoming to those who were here at the time and remains so. I think this is very short-sighted, and I hope it will not have long-term ramifications for where Asian students choose to study in the future. The geopolitics, including the relationship between Australia and China, seems to have impacted on the lives of some Chinese Australians, especially those with family in China. And these are all significant challenges to be navigated. Is there any reason to be optimistic? I think there is. Dickens' words reflect the Janus-like attitudes that I still think permeate our society. It seems difficult at times for our society to escape the impact of our Anglo-Celtic beginnings, even towards the Indigenous owners of the land, let alone those from Asia. Nevertheless, using Dickens' words and removing the negatives, we are left with wisdom, belief, the season of light, and the hope of spring. These sentiments seem to me to encapsulate what the President has said as his counterpoint to striving for you to become the change that you want to see and making the future become more inclusive. There are always opportunities in challenges, and now is probably a good time to accept the challenges and for this organisation to flourish. In 2016, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the proportion of Australians born overseas was nearly 29%. That's getting close to a third. Coupled with second and third generations, they make up a sizable proportion of the population. And what led the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2000 to describe Australia as one of the most diverse countries in the world, associated with 270 ancestries, encompassing a wide variety of cultural and religious traditions. So in one sense, there's no question to be answered. Cultural diversity is important and apparently important to most of the population. Yet Australia's relationship with the multicultural cohort can so often be problematic, and no doubt we will hear from Sami Shah a little later, using humour that he does so well. Humour can be a very important tool. But I believe that we as an Australian collective value our multiculturalism. I recall growing up in the post-war years in a very anodyne culture and was then exposed to the first wave of post-war migration with many Greeks and Italians coming. And I experienced how our dull culture was transformed by the vibrancy and novelty of their cuisine and culture. Then subsequently with Asian immigration, the same thing happened to give us what we have today. So why does representation in all aspects of public life and the legal profession apparently lag so much behind the actuality of how our population is made up and experienced? I don't have the definitive answer, but I postulate that in our society, it takes a long time to force your way, and I use the word advisedly, into the public consciousness. And the converse is that it takes a long time for the public to realise that there is a lacuna in representation in all senses. The broadcaster SBS does a great deal to overcome this lack of representation in the broadcasting world, but they're pretty much alone. And sadly, a lot of people don't watch SBS. Institutions in all forms, too, can be very counterproductive to supporting and promoting minorities. We only have to look at recent examples of major political parties favouring men over women and party faithful over diversity. Arguments can always be mounted, but in the end, it means there's no real commitment to change. That's why I personally think there'll always be an argument to be mounted for a quota. I think it's very smart at this summit to look at how other professions have made achievements and learn from them, as we will be doing today. Two things seem to me important for change to occur. The first is force of numbers. Numbers do matter. I'm thinking particularly of the numbers of Asian law students at many Australian universities. Certainly before COVID, law graduations at some universities had a majority of Asian graduates. If you look at the same trajectory women's advancement took when numbers of graduates increased, then there's reason to be optimistic about the face of the legal profession in the next decade and beyond. And of course, that means more partners in firms, more senior partners, more CEOs in organisations, more prominent barristers, solicitors, and more judges. This also, in a general sense, should mean more board members and more politicians. Secondly, I think, is the need to make yourselves visible. And that's where this organisation has a huge role. It's important to point out inequities and to call out inequities. Women have used that well, but their quest has been a long one. And as you would know, if you watched the recent ABC show, Misrepresented, sexism is still alive and well in the political arena at least. Slow though it may be, progress is being made in the legal profession. And the recent appointment of Justice Hamid Jani to the Supreme Court of New South Wales as the first Australian of Indian descent is a cause for great celebration. I won't say anything about the judiciary because I will leave that to our international patron, or Justice Ravinder Singh, in his closing address. So although we are seeing some progress being made, this must be the beginning, not the end. And it's important to ensure the appointment of one is not seen as enough. We've seen multicultural governors, Vietnamese, Lebanese, and Greek, so it is possible. The Lord Mayor of Melbourne was Chinese, but they are still few and far between. Visibility of Asian Australians is important in the diaspora of modern Australia. I can't affect the change needed, much as I would like to, but you have a vibrant, articulate organisation, and it's up to you to lead the way. All I can do, and I do it enthusiastically, is to give my complete support. Visibility is needed, and you are doing that with this organisation and with this summit. I congratulate your committee on this summit, and I hope you enjoy it virtually, save for South Australians, of course, who are the envy of the rest of us. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you.